This week on The Droids, a second episode of The Droids and the second episode of The Mandalorian has premiered on Disney+. You've got Mike and Sam. We're talking all about Mando Episode 2. What a episode. Oh, let's get into it. Welcome back to The Droids. You're looking for a Star Wars podcast. And Sam, no time to waste. We're going to try to beat the runtime of this episode in this podcast. 28 minutes and I believe about 12 seconds was the actual runtime before credits. Oh, wait, you maybe can cut out a minute of that, Sam. You said it. Minute pre-show, we had the previously on The Mandalorian. So we're looking at about 27 minutes a pod here. Do you think we beat that mark before we're done?
When you say beat that mark, do you mean we're done before it or we're done after it? I can almost guarantee you that we will talk for more than 28 minutes about it. I don't see how we get out of here faster than that.
I mean, I do have to say it's a lot easier to come up with 28 minutes worth of us talking about this episode than actually creating 28 minutes of what was an incredible episode 2 of The Mandalorian.
Let's just give a full-on warning for anybody new to the pod. First of all, thanks for tuning in. We're really excited to have you. We're going to assume that maybe you found us because you're looking for that extra Star Wars nourishment now that we've got new Star Wars coming out weekly on Disney+. But as a warning, we are going to be talking in full detail, full spoilers. We're not holding back. It's going to be our opinions, and episode recaps, all the big reveals. So we're assuming if you're continuing to listen, and we hope you do, that watch and then listen and join the conversation with us.
Join us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Droids Pod, the Droids Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, DroidsPod, and then, of course, droidspod@gmail.com. Rate and review us on iTunes. And for the first time in quite some time, we have a Let's Play on YouTube, youtube.com/droidspod. Ryan is going through Jedi Fallen Order. I made my purchase, but I have not had a chance to play it yet, which means I'm going to get a head start when I watch Ryan's Let's Play through. He is really one of the premier hosts in the history of the Let's Play medium. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Tune in, and really, I think you'll find that this is better than any Scorsese film, is Ryan doing Let's Play.
I mean, it's cinema. I'll tell you what.
Oh, it's cinema.
It's cinema for sure. No, Ryan is actually, just to give him the extra shout, I mean, he's very passionate about video games as well as Star Wars, and he has a deeper knowledge of sort of game design and trends and what's going on in the medium. He gave us a heads up that the first episode of his Let's Play is going to be kind of the tutorial level. He said it's not full of talking, but those episodes, I think the first 2 are dropping this weekend. So definitely check us out on YouTube and give his Let's Play a watch. And I'm sure he'd love to see some comments and get into a dialogue with some of you guys if you follow him there.
Sam, you make it sound like I wasn't being sincere. I was being entirely sincere about what Ryan brings to the table.
Mike, I want to give you a compliment. You're awesome. And I want to make sure that everyone knows we're not fighting. Mike and I aren't fighting. There's not a problem. Everything's fine here. How are you?
Boring conversation anyway. I hope it isn't. I really hope it isn't. That would not be a great podcast.
We should edit that into the end of every episode. It's a boring conversation anyway. What have we been doing? 102, 101, 102 episodes in?
I believe this is 104. I only know that because I did post last week. But anyway, let's get into it, Sam. Mandalorian Episode 2. Just before we even talk about it, I just want to say it was such a weird experience last night thinking there's going to be new Star Wars to watch in a day, having just watched new Star Wars earlier this past week with all of you. The anticipation was high. I don't know how. Actually, I do know how. The reason I didn't watch it first thing in the morning when it was available at 6 a.m. Eastern time was because I have a 1-year-old, and figuring out a way to watch that with him awake was not possible. So I knew I would come back and watch it later in the day. And it didn't disappoint. It was phenomenal. Sam, you watched it on your...
He doesn't know sleeper holds yet? You haven't given him the old... You haven't gone WWE on him?
I think there might be some child issues there. If maybe DCEFF is going to come my way, I don't want to get into trouble there, Sam. Don't set me up for an issue.
Well, let's talk about the exemplary display of parenting skills.
Yes.
I'll tell you how that we saw in episode 2, Mike. I guess you know what. I'm gonna stop us again before we get into it. We actually had a pretty robust conversation before watching it. So you watched it this evening. Mm-hmm. This is Friday. We're recording this Friday, the day it dropped. I watched it. I'm fortunate. I actually work close to home, so I watched it on my lunch. I came
exceedingly
home
jealous
and had lunch at home. And the reason I was able to do that, or a major reason I was able to do that, was this. Top to tail, including all the trimmings, clocked in at 32 minutes. And I know, and when I saw that, and I shared that on the text chain, but saying, "Hey guys, I'm going to watch this on my lunch because it's 32 minutes long." We had a pretty robust conversation. We had some mixed feelings, and so you had a lot of anticipation and excitement built up. New Star Wars, Friday Star Wars twice in 1 week. Now, how did that hit you?
Well, so when I found out it was shorter, I was disappointed, but it was mostly because I had gone in expecting 8 hours of Star Wars. And by 8 hours, I meant probably 8 hours of regular television, so 42 minutes, which is what you usually see in a network television show. Obviously, this is not going to fit any of those parameters being on a streaming service, so they don't have to fit any of the parameters. But I was expecting what I would come back to of like when I revisit a show or a drama that I love, there's a lot of time spent with those characters. And I think Ryan put it best in the text string. You're expecting, maybe not 8 full hours, but, when you add up 42, 45 minutes over the course of 8 episodes, you expect to have a very long period of time versus 8 half-hour episodes, which is going to mostly amount to maybe 4+ hours of content. We don't know how long each episode will be. It's just a little disappointing, but if every episode is as tightly done and as well done as episode 2, I'm not going to have anything else to say.
Well, that's where you said it. So I actually was, from the beginning, I was actually kind of into the idea. I found it exciting, the sort of 32 minutes being so under what we expected. By the way, I did the math. 42-minute episodes would come out to 5.6 hours of
thank you.
Content, just because
thank you.
I know our
do that
listeners
off the top
out there.
of my head.
I know all our L3s out there were sitting there calculating and computing and going wild with anger. But when I saw the 32 minutes, which was much shorter than any of us, we are all thinking this is an hour-long weekly drama. I kind of got excited, and I got excited because it sort of suggested a few things. One, that, because this is a streaming service, they are letting the content dictate the runtime, which I think is a great sign. It's, it's just like any movie you'd go to, you want Once Upon a Time in Hollywood to be, coming close to 3 hours, or, you want Endgame to be a 3-hour affair, and there's other, you want Alien to be, a tight 100 minutes, like that works. So I liked that the content was dictating the runtime. It also suggested to me that they were also willing to divvy up this 8-chapter story at logical endpoints. Mm-hmm. That there, now that may mean there could still be a cliffhanger, but it seemed less likely to me that it would be a full on, sort of cliffhanger till the next episode, and more a sort of natural chapter break like you encounter in a book. And it also signaled to me the idea of like, I was like, this probably isn't going to be dialogue heavy. It's probably not going to be exposition heavy. It's probably going to be really, and Ryan's going to cringe, I'm going to say it, really cinematic, really like sort of visual storytelling, which, you can define cinematic how you want, but I did feel like this episode was all told through action, all told visually, and I will unequivocally, I liked it far better than episode 1. Like, you need episode 1 to set it up, but this episode was, in my opinion, miles beyond it.
I think for several reasons, and one of the things that really stood out to me was the direction. And I'm not trying to take any shots at Dave Filoni because I really think he did a great job with the first episode. And, anyone knows going into your first live action directing, he even said it in the Q&A that was part of the premiere, where this is a totally new thing for him. He's never had to deal with the time constraints, with working with actors who actually had to be there face-to-face with him who were playing characters. So it was a very different experience for him. And I think he still did a very good job in the first episode. But this is directed in a way where I felt like I don't know, like all of the awareness that I had in episode 1, and part of that is knowing that Dave Filoni was directing, coming from the animated world to the real life world, to the live action show, it fell away. I didn't have the awareness. I was just watching and engrossed in the way this was shot, the way it was cut, the decisions that were made. I didn't sit and notice any of what felt like a little bit of maybe fat on some scenes, or not necessarily just in runtime, but the way they were shot. And it just really moved the entire episode.
It absolutely did just move. It moved really well. It moved really well, I think, because of the runtime. It was really condensed and concise and efficient storytelling in the best possible way. I will say there were a couple of beats where I thought like, no, I'm going to double back on that. I guess the only thing we talked about it on our previous episode, when we talked episode 1 about, Filoni's timing for a joke, Filoni's visual timing and like that sort of pacing, I think was excellent.
Yeah, it was.
And I'm kind of like, there were a couple of moments, I'm thinking particularly, we'll obviously go through the beats of the episode, but I'm thinking like the moments when he was like climbing the sand crawler, where I was like, this feels like it's, they could have cut 1 or 2 shots of this out of there.
Felt that. I didn't feel that at all. I was just giddy. I was just loving it.
It's a delightful episode. It ties really nicely right on the heels of the previous. And I also just, again, I know you're, definitely singing Filoni's praises with me. But the other thing, too, is like not only was it his first live action, but it's also pilots are notoriously difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, pilots, there is no freedom from exposition and the kind of boring, tricky stuff in long-form storytelling. That all has to happen in the pilot. And it's the reason that pilot season's so cutthroat. It's the reason writers spend their lives honing the skills to write a skillful pilot. I just am wanting to like emphasize for everybody listening that it's like we are not bashing Filoni in any way. Like quite the opposite. In fact, I think what we're just also doing is saying that Rick Famuyiwa,
not easy to pronounce. I don't know how to pronounce it either.
Famuyiwa.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so embarrassing.
Director of Dope. He is a skilled director.
What an incredible turn, and he turned in a not quite silent film, but a really efficient one. So do you want to run through some beats and talk about how in order kind of what happens?
Absolutely. I do want to say one thing before we start, and you kind of alluded to it with the silent film aspect. This to me felt like a Star Wars short in some ways, and we had the setup that we had in episode 1 to make it a little bit easier to know where everything was coming from. But it felt like if at some point in the mid-90s and before we got to the special editions, before we got to the prequels, if somebody just dropped this as a story, everyone would have been like, wow, that was awesome. And that's exactly what I wanted to see in terms of other parts of the galaxy. And yet this episode still has everything else it's going to build, that it built off of from episode 1 and that it's building to and beyond the rest of the series. I just still thought it worked so well on its own that you felt like you could have been dropped in at any point in the last 40 years of Star Wars.
It's actually true. It's really funny given the iconography. Like if this had come out as a short or like an independent thing that was officially produced, I guess you'd just think like, oh, weird. Boba Fett and Yoda knew each other. And like, but otherwise it would work so completely, and it would be so easy to just, like you say, drop in, and you don't need any more or less, but I'm glad we're getting more.
Oh, absolutely. All right. So the way this began is that it follows up very quickly after the end of episode 1, and we see, well, you can't help but keep on saying Baby Yoda. It's not necessarily Baby Yoda. We don't know yet. There's a lot of theories about what this species version of Yoda could be, but it's the Mandalorian and this baby of the species from Yoda going through some caverns, leaving the village that they were in when taken away. And the first moment that I could kind of took a step back and was appreciating the filmmaking decision was when I could see in the reflection of the helmet of the Mandalorian, the Trandoshans jumping above them in the cavern. So that reflection made me laugh for a moment, because we had seen earlier still images of an upcoming fight in that area, so you kind of knew it was happening. But I thought it was such a nice little nod to people who are paying close attention that here is he's already on edge, but we get a little bit of a clue of what's coming in the reflection of what is a chrome dome helmet, and we might see a little bit more of that as time goes on.
On the note, just like as it started out, I love the pairing. I mean, it's a little bit tropey, but just the idea that you're putting a bounty hunter, in charge of an innocent, and something that he hasn't experienced, and we kind of, we were hinted at in the first episode. I don't like calling it episode 1, like chapter 1.
No, I know. Chapter 1.
Let's call as far as the pod, until we learn different, we're going to refer to them in chapters.
I mean, they do say chapters.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, they do say chapters.
So that's why they don't want us to say episode 1. They want to reserve that. So,
and the episode is called Chapter 2, The Child.
Yes. And I just, I think we learn in chapter 1 a little bit that the Mandalorian of note in this series, experienced trauma as a child. So, there's complicated sort of feelings there. But yeah, I think I'm just trying to remember. I liked that also it started with the actual question. Like, we saw how he got to this outpost, and that, they needed to use those creatures to run along the rocks, because otherwise it would be maybe too dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
And in this episode, he's left to walk back, and not only does he have to walk through dangerous territory, but he's got this little, like, floating baby pod to chase him, to follow him.
You mean the most adorable thing that's ever been in Star Wars, with maybe
my goodness.
Maybe the one exception would be the Ewok who was listening to C-3PO's story, but I'll be honest, this is definitely more adorable.
There were a few shots. I'm very curious how much I would love to see sort of a making of. Maybe almost certainly they'll release one when it's all aired. Because I kind of want to know the ratio of, like, practical to digital effects on the Baby Yoda.
I think it's a lot of practical. I mean, I know there's digital on there, especially even further in the episode. You can see the hairs on the top of his head blowing in the wind. His or her head. We don't know whether or not this is male or female species of Yoda. But I really think it's a lot of practical puppetry in this. And I actually think in the entire series, we've seen the Salacious Crumb, Kowakian monkey lizard, being obviously roasted, but also one in a cage. The character of Nick Nolte is also a puppet. I think there's a lot of puppetry in this series.
I wish some of the other guys were on tonight. I want to get you a round of applause for, like, you're dropping so many specific creature names right now. You called the Trandoshans?
I don't think I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's Trandoshans, I think.
Oh my God, Mike! I'm so impressed. I'm loving it. Okay, so we get the reflection. We think that this is we think it's puppetry, or at least heavy puppetry. At least in this episode. The first episode, I thought it looked really CG. Mm-hmm. I need to watch chapter 1 again.
Yeah.
But this episode, definitely, I was convinced that Baby Yoda was a puppet. And okay, so getting up to the Trandashans, which are nicely foreshadowed, literally foreshadowed in a forehead shadow. Is that what that's short for?
That's exactly what it is. It's always been about foreheads. You're right. Man, really breaking some news here. Not a lot of people knew that.
No. We're nothing if not vocabulists. So there's a really good. I got a big word box. That's what I used to say.
You have the best words.
Class.
All the words. The best words.
Yeah. Oh boy. No. Hey, the clock's ticking on that. So we have a pretty cool fight scene. I thought the fight scene was fine. This didn't knock me out. This wasn't quite to me as entertaining as the, IG-11.
No, but it was solid. I thought, there's a lot in here where if it is always Pedro Pascal, we don't know that it is, but to be in that full costume, whoever the stuntman may be, and even the Trandashans who are in those as well, there's a lot of nice choreography here that looks really good. And I think it's also interesting, and again, we've talked about species being reused. Here is the species of Bosk, another bounty hunter, who these characters happen to be bounty hunters, also looking for Baby Yoda, because we see their fob at the end of the scene. It's never going to be over. The Mandalorian, really what we likely have seen now, once again, that forehead shadowing. This is going to be what the rest of this season may be about, is more and more people, more and more bounty hunters coming for Baby Yoda.
Yeah, protecting the cargo. I just, again, this is not about forehead shadowing, but it's kind of about foreheads. I also will commend, I'd say both episodes, but particularly Rick Famuyiwa in this episode. And, oh man, I read the DP's name and now I've forgotten it. But the way they shoot, they really are sort of expert at showing how much emotion camera and lighting and sound can draw out of an immobile face.
Yeah.
This guy, so far, 2 chapters in, the Mandalorian is, still not removing his helmet. And I think that's great. That's fine. But I think, you run the risk of, how many times have people said, oh, acting through a mask, it limits so much of what you can do as an actor. And maybe that's true for Pedro Pascal personally. Maybe some of his tools are taken away as an actor, but what the photography of this episode in particular, it's like I frequently felt things looking at that, cold, dead Beskar mask,
It reminded me, and I think there's been a question that was posed out on Twitter about, there's never been another series or film where the main character, the one that you are supposed to be rooting for, the one you're supposed to be relating to, has been masked the entire time. There has been V for Vendetta, where you think of V always wearing the mask. However, V's not the main character.
Right. They have Natalie Portman, who
emotes,
who emotes for at least 2 people.
Emotes for days in that film. But I don't think we're going to go the entire run of this season without seeing him with the helmet off, because I think you maybe could have gotten away with somebody you didn't pay as much as Pedro Pascal for the main role if you're never going to take his helmet off. I think it will happen. I just think they're going to he's still predominantly going to be in the helmet, but at some point they're going to need to show it. And maybe part of this is even having Baby Yoda as a character is, if you can't relate to him in the mask, you still feel an emotional connection to the situation of him protecting Baby Yoda.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I don't know what to expect. So far the series has actually surprised me, which
same.
It's doing stuff I didn't expect.
And a lot of props. And I will say, you got to give that tip of the cat to Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni and everybody involved so far, is this has been, if anything, it's unexpected. They have not gone the traditional route. They have decided to, and I don't think it's entirely about making Star Wars weird again, but they've gone down a very specific road that is very aware of the fan base that has loved the Clone Wars. It is more tapping into that passionate group a lot of average fans don't even know what Mandalore is, let alone any of the story of Mandalore. It still works for them, but yet they're being very specific and at times quite off the wall and quite odd. The scene in here, and I'm jumping a little bit ahead, that made me kind of think like, oh, all right, well, I guess this is going to be maybe the Star Wars that's a little more tailored to us, is when the egg is broken open by the Jawas and they start diving in. And I'm like, whoa, okay, this is not your typical broad Star Wars.
It definitely got weird, and I would say, I was just going to jump on the other thing you said, which is that like we learn a little bit about Mandalorians in this episode in a very cool way.
Oh, yeah.
First through a line of dialogue, and then that what Famuyiwa does so well in this episode is everything is set up. We haven't even gotten to it, but so moving past the fisticuffs in the caves, we see his weapon at work, and we see that his rifle disintegrates people.
Which I saw a great moment on Twitter. Somebody said, is this why Darth Vader told Boba Fett no disintegrations in Empire?
Oh, it's definitely why they chose to make that gun do that.
It's why they did that in this. Of course, they're referencing back to that. But
I never would have caught that. That's so smart.
And you know what? I didn't either. I have to give the credit to where I saw it on Twitter, and unfortunately I do not know the user who did post that, but that it's a very astute observation.
But let's just I just want to unfortunately I'm going to like jump way ahead here on this part, but like we can backtrack, but I just want to like set up something that it's like the way this episode is constructed. In the fight, we see the rifle finally get used, and it disintegrates one of the Trandoshans.
Don't trust my pronunciation.
Then as they come upon the ridge, we've already hinted that Jawas are in this episode. There's a sandcrawler full of Jawas who have completely stripped the Mandalorian ship. He fires at several of them, disintegrating them. We see that he keeps the ammo on his ankle. We see how he has to load and how the rifle actually works. And then we see throughout the episode the way he interacts with his technology, his other weapons. We've seen we see the cable get used, like the grappling cable get used. We know where he keeps his hand blaster. And in the final confrontation against the I'll call it a space rhino, that happens, which is, it literally goes through. We are with the Mandalorian through action because we know when things aren't working. We know when he's out of ammo. We know when his rifle jams, not just through, we've seen it work correctly. And so we see it fail. And then we see, I just thought the way the episode built up to each of those points and how it educated us through action and visuals to like get to the point where when we're in this big fight, there are stakes because we are seeing everything that he uses kind of not work as it should.
It's so well established.
It was so well directed and established. In we've now, Mike,
we hit it. We passed
time check. We have now gone longer than the episode of television of which we speak,
and we haven't even talked about maybe even 5% of the episode.
There's so much more to cover.
I want to go back to the Jawas like you talked about. And the first time that we see that the ship has been stripped. And it's one of those things that you never thought about how someone else would deal with the way the Jawas operate, and that the Sandcrawler and the business of what they're in is going and taking anything they can find. You think of, what was it? The scavenger that they refer to Rey in The Force Awakens, and anybody else who's going through deserts looking for anything that they can, find and sell, they're going to come upon a ship and take everything they can get, and how that would affect someone. And it doesn't affect someone in just a throwaway moment. And, they may have to fly their ship away missing some of its parts. It is a key plot point for the episode that the Jawas took the majority of the ship, and he can't leave the planet, and now it's even more difficult for him to protect his new ward in Baby Yoda. And I thought that was such a wonderful moment of taking something that we knew and turning it into something totally new that resulted in a great sequence of events, not just him chasing the Sandcrawler, but then the eventual needing to go to them to get everything back.
Yeah, we see the other side of the transaction that opens A New Hope, and we see it, in a way that does not betray the characters. I mean, I think we have to spend more time with the Jawas in this episode, in this chapter of TV, than we did in all of Star Wars before.
Well, he has left that planet. Now, we do know that Jawas are on other planets as well, but I think you're just really looking forward to about 18 years from now when we get Jawas, a Star Wars Disney Plus series.
I'd love it. I'd love it. Give it to me animated. Give it to me with puppets.
And you don't want any subtitles, do you, Sam?
I definitely do not, because this was, again, another thing that was so delightful.
So what you're saying is an animated Despicable Me style Jawa series. That's what works.
I'll take it. Banana. But no, I loved the inclusion. I loved that it was also, I mean, it was just a smart play. The iconography of Jawas and their sandcrawlers is so strong and so instantly recognizable and so immediately Star Wars. And to rip off and do an Indiana Jones moment,
I know,
on
it was totally indie. It was so indie. It was great.
Hey, it's Lucasfilm. If anybody gets to do that, it's these guys.
And not only was it indie in the sequence and what happened with trying to avoid the rock as the sandcrawler was going to drive into it with him on the side, the music was very indie.
The
Ludwig was totally on board for that too.
The music was super indie, and he gets it's in classic Indiana Jones style. He succeeds. He gets to the top, and then he gets zapped and knocked off.
I know.
Like, it's so delightful. And then we have we have him essentially passed out, lose their trail, and we have the return of my favorite character in Star Wars, Nick Nolte.
Wait, I want to make sure, can we figure out, we're being quite bad about pronunciations in this episode. He is an Ugnaught, but his character's name is spelled Kuiil. Kuiil?
I'm this is not me being a jerk. I'm going to call him Nick Nolte. That is his Star Wars name.
It's not canon, Sam.
That man's an alien. He's been living among us for years.
I mean, if you're talking about Gary Busey, sure, but Nick Nolte, he coached a basketball team. He's not an alien.
Man, how do you know where we got basketball from?
Exactly.
It could be on, planet Zorg 9.
Well, really, when you set down the rules to basketball, and it's a new thing, I mean, people know this, is when they say the ball is ready to be tipped, every official says, "I have spoken," and the game begins.
I have spoken. I loved it.
It's actually, I was very pleasantly surprised to have that back, have his character back. I kind of thought that might have been that one beat moment for that character, and then we were done. And likely we are now done after episode 2, but I enjoyed that there was more. And it was another nice extension of what was a very good relationship between those two characters.
Yeah, it's such a warm character, and it's a character that brings such positivity while still having some interesting motives and maybe a little bit of darkness, around them. But of course, Kuiil, helps the Mandalorian go track down the Jawas, negotiate, barter with them. First they want his Beskar. Do they want the Baby Yoda first, or do they want his Beskar first? But either way,
yeah, I think they want Baby Yoda first.
The first two things they want cannot be parted with, and then they realize, well, we can have him get something for us, the egg. And I don't know about you, I fully expected this to be some piece of technology, some other hunk of junk, and I think it's set up in a way that's it's definitely something of value they're going to sell.
Yeah, totally.
Nope, it's an egg. It's a literal egg, and they do with eggs what we do with eggs.
Wait,
kinda.
Sam, every morning you start by cracking open an egg, reaching your hands in, and I didn't need to hear that. Come on, Sam.
Everybody on podcasts loves wet mouth sounds.
Boy.
No, it's a literal egg. It's the egg of this creature that has just, well, okay, so he goes to do it, goes to a cave, tracks down the creature, and Mike, there's a fight. There's a big old fight.
There's a wonderful fight. And as you said...
Mando versus Rhino.
Oh, that's what they could have called the episode. Instead of The Child, Chapter 2, Mando versus Rhino. And some of the music sounds a bit Rocky-esque. I think that would have worked.
There we go. I'll take it.
Put them in the ring together. But there's actual, in this, he tries everything. He tries the tools that he has. He tries all the weapons that he has. Nothing is really working for him. But I also love that as he continues to get kind of ravaged in this fight, he is covered in mud more and more and more. And there's a top-down shot of him lying down in the mud with his helmet covered entirely in mud. And it kind of looked beautiful to me. I kind of just took a moment. I'm like, you mentioned we need to name check the DP at some point because that just looked wonderful.
It was beautifully shot. It was also, I mean, it was super interesting to see. It tells more about the character that it's like he's getting beat to hell.
Yeah.
And he keeps doing it. And it's like he's doing it. Yeah, I know that he's like stranded if he doesn't, but like, you know, this is a guy that in, I think, a weaker storyteller's hands would be like, could kill all the Jawas or could steal his parts back or somehow, clever his way out of it. But no, he's like resilient and fights his way through. And we get a shot where when everything fails him, when he has truly no hope, the rhinosaur is gonna like, you know, is gearing up for the final charge, and he removes a small blade, of Beskar steel, I assume, and it really sets up in what, you know, it looks like sort of a suicide pose, ready to, you know, he's gonna take the beast with him if he can, but he's kind of committed to like standing his ground and probably dying on that ground. And it's really, it was a little unexpected and really powerful. I thought he's a warrior to the core, and the sort of it's like he will, as Mandalorians must, he will die with his weapon in his hand.
Yeah,
is kind of interesting, very honorable, very kind of cool. I felt for him. I was worried for his character.
Yeah.
And then
it leads to the biggest moment of the episode, which extends and kind of builds on what we thought in Chapter 1, which when we watched Chapter 1, we wondered, is there going to be the Force in The Mandalorian? Yes, there will be, and in a big way from a small package in Baby Yoda, which we all know size matters not.
Oh, we don't know. We don't know how big.
We all know size matters not. And we couldn't and shouldn't have judged him by his size. And what a moment for that to take place in this series. Because I thought it was coming, but even when it happened, I got up and cheered. I got up and I just couldn't contain my excitement for seeing that at 50 years old, despite still being a baby and an infant, the Force in that species is so strong that he could save the Mandalorian.
I thought for sure that, you know, Baby Yoda's Force powers were going to be in episode 6, 7, or 8 reveal. I thought there's no way we see it. I think we see hints of it. The fact that they got to it in episode 2 is further exciting to me because it just, again, it opens up all the possibilities that all the directions this series can go. I mean, we got 6 episodes left, and it feels like we've seen, like I have now seen most of, I don't know. I've seen a lot of what I know is coming, you know, from the teasers and trailers. There's a couple things yet, but I really think they haven't spoiled too much with this show through the advertising.
The only thing that I can think of is there's that no-look shot where he kills a stormtrooper that we have not seen in the series yet.
Well, I'm thinking of characters that I know. You know,
Cara Dune we haven't seen.
There's some big characters that we know are going to be feature heavily, who we haven't been introduced
Giancarlo
to.
Esposito, yep.
But I truly think, I mean, I don't think we're going to be waiting too long for them to appear. So the long and the short of it, because we're closing in on chapter 1 runtime now. He survives. He gets the egg with Yoda's help. Baby Yoda, who passes out. And
look, Sam, I know I'm a broken record on this, but I have to tell you, most 1-year-olds, when they exert that kind of effort, or 50-year-old infants, they're usually out for a good period of time after that. If I could convince my 1-year-old to lift up a rhino with his powers, then I could get him to actually sleep, which would be great.
I'll tell you what, you'd have yourself a deal for a Disney Plus series if you could get him to do that.
I thought you were going to say I'd also have myself a stew. Carl Weathers wasn't in this episode.
No, that's
Space
good,
Rhino
though.
stew.
So he survives. He gets back. He makes the exchange, and once again, Kuil sort of selflessly, decides independently to help repair the Mandalorian ship, which they have a great a great little montage of them working and doing the impossible.
Sam, if they needed a mechanic in Star Wars, and they needed a very quality, very proficient mechanic, I'm not quite sure why they didn't go to the one, the only, Mr. Lowell Mather.
Oh, man, you need Ryan on here. I'm the one guy who's gonna be the slowest on that. Again, if you're new to the pod, you will be encountering a lot of turbulence when we're trying to get through these episodes. A lot of wings talk, a lot of chatter.
Wings turbulence. Actually, you know what? Considering he would not be able to fill those big shoes of Nick Nolte, I think Thomas Hayden Church could have played that role. Anyway, back to what you were talking about. They rebuilt the ship.
They build the ship, and Mandalorian offers him a place on board. He could use essentially a crewman, a sidekick, a mechanic. But Nolte turns it down. He says that he's been waiting for this piece. They go their separate ways, and the episode concludes with the Mandalorian flying through space as the baby Yoda species, awakens after being conked out for the whole rest of the episode. So we, off to see where does the Mandalorian take this baby? Where does he take the child, and what happens next? I'm so excited to find out.
I'm so excited to find out, and every turn so far that I thought that I knew they would take, and even though, we kind of felt the Force was coming with Baby Yoda in that scene, it still was a nice surprise that made me excited. I don't know. My instinct would say he'll be torn. He'll go back, think about actually dropping off Baby Yoda to get him off his plate so that he can just get the Beskar and move on. And then, just as he's about to turn him over to Werner Herzog, he'll have a change of heart. That's too expected to me. That is the story that we think we're going to see. And I'm so far from 2 chapters in, I don't think that's what we're going to get.
I mean, from what we've seen so far in this series, that would be out of character with the Mandalorian we've seen so far. Now, I'm not saying they won't go that route. I agree with you; it's a little predictable, but they could, and if they do it well, I'm here for it. But I would say that the most refreshing and cool thing that they've done with this character so far is made him undeniably and unequivocally ready to defend and protect the child. And it's that's a cool turn. It's not been a burden. It has not been something that he's been reluctant about in any way.
No, you're right. It was very definitive when he took out IG-11. It wasn't they didn't have a scene where he looks at IG-11, looks back at Baby Yoda, and looks at IG-11, looks back at Baby Yoda. He just took out IG-11. Now, IG-11 being a droid, it's a little bit easier. You're going to make that decision.
Still, it was beautifully set up. Mike? Speculation aside, let's turn our gaze back. Favorite moment of the episode?
I'm glad you asked that, There's a lot in here, and I mean, the Force scene is certainly my top favorite, but I would say my close second is the back and forth with Baby Yoda coming out of his carrier to try to help the Mandalorian as he's, sewing himself up or healing himself. And he walks over twice, and it's so freaking adorable and so cute and just shows what is at the core of this youngling Yoda species. And that moment of levity between the two of them is really sweet and also very relatable for young kids and what they do without thinking.
I loved that scene. It's one of the only sort of pause, like slow beats of the episode, which really totally moves.
But it also I do want to say is that the music there, the shots, the cinematography in that moment, they shot it clearly at like dusk. It made me feel like I was there. And that's one of those things that I think I really look for in a lot of pieces of cinema, of TV, where I love to kind of have the emotional reaction of or feel like I could be in that setting. And I feel like that happened a lot more as a kid, and it doesn't happen to me as often. So when I get moments like that, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I know. I'm with you. I that's a delightful scene. So I think I already spoke to my favorite element of the episode, which was again the way it was the way they set up the fight with the Rhino to like see the equipment. I think the thing that I took away most from the episode was that. But in terms of picking one just favorite moment, I think I'm going to go with the moment, just because I loved it so much, when he gets to the top of the sandcrawler and has the beat of facing them down. And I can't remember if he even, if he shoots one or if he grabs his gun or if he does something. And then immediately gets hit like a dozen times with their little electro guns. And he just zaps and fries up and then falls off the back. And it's something so unexpected. The levity and silliness of this show. They're not afraid to take the piss out of their lead. This guy who's the ultimate cool. They're not afraid to show him mess up and get he gets beat up by a bunch of Jawas. It's really funny. It's really, really funny. And I think I was just so delighted to have the Jawas back in Star Wars, in this way. That moment, I'm going to put that down as my favorite.
That's great. It really was. You've said it a bunch of times. I think Ryan tweeted it out. Delightful is the word, and delightful was the word used for The Force Awakens when Larry Kasdan and JJ were writing it. This episode felt very delightful. I don't know that we're going to see delightful in every episode, because I think we're going to get some much more serious moments, more dramatic moments, and it'll still be delightful. But I think with 8 episodes, we're going to have to feel a little bit more suspense, a little more tension, and a little bit more drama that I think is going to be pulling at our heartstrings, especially as long as these two are wandering the outer rim together.
But keep it at 28 minutes. No, I'm kidding. Honestly, keep it where it needs to be. If they need some time to tell the chapter, give them the time. But if like this episode, it runs short, man, there was so much packed in. I think we ought to wrap up here soon, but yeah. I feel like I could talk to you about this all night, Mike.
Well, and the good thing is that we're going to go back and do another episode with Ryan and Chris next week before chapter 3 of The Mandalorian does premiere. We'll get the thoughts from Chris and Ryan as well. Don't forget, check out Ryan and his Let's Play through on Jedi Fallen Order. It is available on youtube.com/droidspod. Check it out there. Sam, I just feel like when it's an embarrassment of riches. We wake up, there's a new Star Wars video game, there's a new episode of Star Wars, and I couldn't believe that I wasn't staying up till 3 a.m. last night to watch the episode the moment it was available, because that's what I feel like happens when Star Wars comes out. That's what I do. And because we have 8 of these, and I'm no longer 17, I can't do that, but it's still just as gratifying to watch it. And this is, let's mark it down as like episode 2. Episode 1 was great, and we really loved it. But now episode 2, that really felt like Star Wars, and that we're in for a treat of a series that I think probably is going to be better than any right it has to be, because they've got somebody like Dave Filoni involved who's figured out what works in the Star Wars, serialized storytelling that he's done before, that he's helping bring to live action. I
think he's their ace in the hole, for sure.
Yeah.
I think he's all over this episode, in terms of just what elements of storytelling are there, the pacing, like how fast it moves and stuff, even though he didn't do this, chapter 2. But Mike, here's the other thing, man. This life, with this embarrassment of riches that we're experiencing, this is all a distraction, man. This is every week of your life up until the Rise of Skywalker drops in December. And
I know.
And that's a little over a month away. What a time. What a time to be a Star Wars fan.
Alive.
And for everybody who's not us, on top of all of it, just the cherry on top of the sundae, they get episodes of the Droids Pod.
Ooh. Wow. Some lucky people out there.
Lucky. Well, we hope they feel the same way.
Well, this has been our breakdown of Chapter 2, The Child of Mandalorian, and we will talk more in our next episode. Join us again. This has been The Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast.
What they wrote. It is, I have spoken. Damn it. I messed it up. We'll keep this in. There you go.
Wait, what was the other thing you said we needed to put at the end of every episode?
Boring conversation anyway. Hey, kid, hurry up.
Boring conversation anyway.